Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1229, 1229, Sunday, August the 23rd, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the last 24 hours. Probably the biggest story that's come out in the past 24 hours regarding the Spygate story, which is really all we talk about here. Is that we have this spokesperson for Mr. Potato Head, John Brennan, coming out and putting out a statement. Basically saying in a nutshell that Brennan was told he was not a target or a subject of the investigation, and that he was just there to act as more of a witness to verify or question certain facts that have come to light since the investigation began. So let's go through all the things about this that are very questionable and should raise a lot of skepticism. First of all, let's keep in mind that this spokesman that we're talking about here was not in that interrogation, which lasted for 8 hours. 8 hours. Another thing that I think is very interesting, what we're learning, is that this interview was not conducted at FBI headquarters in D.C. It was actually conducted at CIA headquarters. That is in Virginia. And that's key, because that means if Brennan perjured himself, and I'm sure he did on multiple occasions in the interview, that means that the charges against him will be filed in the Eastern District of Virginia, not D.C. Much tougher road to hoe in Virginia than in D.C. for John Brennan when he's facing indictment. And I believe he will be, because I believe he perjured himself all over the place. So Brennan's spokesperson is this guy Nick Shapiro. Again, he was not there. He comes out and makes a statement, and he posts up a bunch of things on Twitter. No quotations, and never does he actually say that Brennan told him anything. So how does Shapiro know what went down if he wasn't there? And why would not Brennan come out and speak for himself? He's had no problem up to this point getting on Twitter, going out on TV, but for some reason, Brennan didn't want to come out and make this statement himself. He wanted to use his surrogate, and he made sure that his surrogate never put anything in quotations or never made any reference that he was told these things by Brennan. Shapiro doesn't say where he learned about what went down in this interrogation, which lasted for 8 hours. In Virginia, Brennan's lawyers have issued no statement whatsoever. They've issued no statement as to whether the statement by Shapiro is true or not. Now, they would know. Brennan's lawyers were there. Why didn't they make the statement? Why won't they confirm the statement? They won't. Various reporters have also contacted the Durham investigation and the DOJ press office, and they will not confirm what Shapiro said, that Brennan's not a target of the investigation. And as you're reading through this statement, you eventually begin to figure out after a couple paragraphs that it's a bunch of BS. Because at some point, Shapiro starts talking about the fact that Brennan was taking Durham to task over Barr and Trump launching the investigation, questioning the activities of the intelligence agencies, and even the investigation itself. Probably not a good idea. My guess is that Durham, assuming he was in the interview, was not amused. But even if he wasn't in the interview, his attorneys and investigators, I'm sure, were not amused at Brennan sitting there taking them to task for having this investigation. My guess is it didn't even happen. The idea that Brennan strode in there all confident and told off these investigators for having an investigation looking into his activities and the intelligence community activities and the FBI activities, that somehow Brennan's going to go in there and throw this around in these guys' faces. Well, I can almost be certain that these guys wouldn't stand for that whatsoever. They didn't come there to get a lecture. They didn't ask Brennan to come and give them a lecture. They asked him to come and answer some questions. And I can absolutely guarantee you that before Brennan was asked a single question, that the attorneys in the room advised Brennan that if he lies to them, he will be charged with perjury. They probably told him he doesn't have to say anything. They probably told him he can get up and leave the room anytime he wants. Plead the fifth. He doesn't have to be there. He volunteered. But once volunteering, if he makes false statements, provides false evidence, omits evidence, he could then be charged with perjury, which would be the least of the charges he would be facing. Shapiro says Brennan never a target or a subject. There we go. We know he's lying. Because the Department of Justice and the FBI don't really use the term subject when they're talking about interviewing a witness or anyone like that. That's not really a term that they work with. Target is, they will talk about a target of an investigation or a witness in an investigation, but this term subject of an investigation is really just something that people like me and people in the media use. It's just a term that we use. But investigators, FBI people, DOJ lawyers, people like that, Durham's team, there's no legal meaning for that. There's no reason to identify someone as a subject. It has no legal bearing in anything. So the very fact that Shapiro is using media language and not legal language or language that the FBI would use tells me that this is not a true statement. They would not refer to Brennan or use the term subject. That's would not happen. And again, they would not tolerate Brennan sitting there trying to bust their balls over investigating him. They wouldn't put up with that. They would shut him down immediately and advise him that he's there to answer their questions. They're the questioners, he's the questionee. They wouldn't invite him there to get a lecture, and they certainly wouldn't sit there and take one. Not from Mr. Potato Head. And Mr. Shapiro says that Brennan was only there to act as a witness. He's only there to act as a witness. Well, if he was only there to act as a witness just for someone to help them ascertain some facts, he would have been one of the early people called in to interview. But he wasn't. He's one of the last, if not the last, on the intelligence side of people to be interviewed. That usually means that you are the target. If you're the last person questioned, you're the target. They get all the evidence from everyone else, then they bring you in and interview you to see if you contradict any of the evidence they've obtained so far. Then they get to decide who's lying. If they wanted John Durham, if John Durham wanted Brennan only as a witness, then the place that you would have a witness perform would be in front of a grand jury when he's acting as a witness against some other target that you are investigating. If they were interested in John Brennan being a witness, he would have been called into a grand jury to testify and provide evidence that could be used against a potential target. But he was not called in to a grand jury. He was called in to see if he would voluntarily come in and answer questions with Durham's team. Keep in mind, Durham's team's already done all the background investigation. Every question they're going to ask Brennan, they already know the answer to. They also are going to be asking questions where Brennan has two choices. Number one, tell the truth and incriminate himself, or B, lie and incriminate himself for perjury. You could say it was a legal perjury trap. And a legitimate one at that. Now, I talked yesterday about the fact that one of the reasons that Brennan would likely come in and talk is because he's super arrogant. And he believes that being a spy for all these years, his job being as a professional liar, someone who's very good at mixing up things. And remember, people like Brennan will never really talk about facts and evidence and things like that. They'll just tell you, well, I don't deal in facts and evidence. I'm in the CIA. We deal in guesswork, analyzing things, guessing at things, hypotheticals. That's what we do. Intelligence, not evidence. But unfortunately, Brennan, in his own right, got involved in the evidence business in 2015 and 2016. So he can sit there and try to play the spin job with Durham and talk about, well, I don't do evidence, I do intelligence, blah, 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 blah. But in fact, he was involved in the evidence business in 2015 and 2016, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Now, Durham has probably looked at various interviews, or his team has, where Brennan has been interviewed previously by Congress and depositions given behind closed doors over the years and various things he's been involved in. And they have identified Brennan as a pathological liar. He is a big fat liar. He lies just about every time he's under oath in a testimony. And he believes that he's so smart that he can twist and bend things, and he can use these techniques of objectivism, where he can make everything sound like there's no black or white, that everything is gray, and that it's simply your, it's a subjective opinion or an objective way of looking at anything and everything. But criminal prosecutors are black and white people who deal in facts and evidence and yeses and nos, checks and non-checks. So the game that Brennan is playing may work when you're manipulating idiot members of Congress and lying your way through a testimony, but they're not going to stand up to hard scrutiny by good investigators, prosecutors, and attorneys, because they're not going to let you off the hook. They're going to force you into black and white territory, into yeses and nos. So I would doubt that Brennan had much success in playing the game that the intelligence people play, which is that nothing is black and white. Everything is whatever it looks like to you. It looks different to me. It looks different to him. We all have it's a subjective reality. The reality is whatever each of us think it is. This is the world that people like Brennan live in, and it's how he's been able to survive and thrive in that corrupt world for so long. But he's now been called in to actually answer for things that he was a part of, where facts and evidence do come into light. And when you look at what Brennan was doing in 2015, 2016, clearly he was in the evidence game. So they know Brennan's a liar, they know he's arrogant, and they know he probably felt like he could come in there and do a spin job on them. And if he really did, as this spokesperson is saying, try to come in there and go after Trump and Barr and say nasty things about them, criticize them and the investigation itself, my guess is those FBI investigators and lawyers were probably not entertained or amused by that. And I think that I think he is a target. I think some they didn't probably tell him that, but maybe they lured him in, and they thought, let's just see if this guy's stupid enough to come in and talk to us, and he was. And keep in mind, every question they ask him, they already know the answer to, and probably have evidence to support what they know. The whole idea was to get Brennan in there to contradict the evidence that they now have. Let's keep in mind, we learned weeks and weeks ago that Brennan had already interviewed a lot of the high-level people, intel people at the CIA, about the ICA and about putting the dossier material into the ICA, and particularly about who was responsible for making the claim that the Russians were working to help Trump and hurt Hillary. That, according to, and we just learned this a few weeks back, several weeks back, that what Durham's investigators found out from talking to the CIA analysts is that they were upset about the fact that Brennan pushed this and went with the narrative that the Russians were trying to help Trump when they had contradictory evidence to that. Their evidence suggested that there were some Russians, political types, who thought it would be better to have a Trump. There was others who thought it would be better to have a Hillary, because at least they know what they're getting with Hillary. And Putin had been very successful in dealing with Obama and Hillary. He pretty much had his way with them. Whereas with Trump, he's a unknown quantity. And they would rather go with the devil they know than the devil they don't know. And they know how compromised the rotten Reverend Clinton is, along with Obama. And there was no evidence that these CIA analysts had that showed that the Russians were working to help Trump. They just didn't have that evidence, and they were pretty upset that Brennan overruled them and put that in the intelligence community assessment. That is what Durham has already learned from the CIA analysts, top analysts, who were involved in what was going to go into the ICA and whether or not they were going to put that in there, that Russia was trying to help Trump. And we now know that the top CIA analysts were very upset that they did not agree with that, but it was put in there anyway, over their objections. You can bet that Durham asked Brennan about that. You better believe it. Of course, again, if you look at that statement by Brennan's spokesperson, they fall back on the Mueller report and the Senate Intelligence Committee report, both of which can easily be discredited. The Mueller report's pretty much been blown out of the water by the I.G. Horowitz report and by what we've learned in the past year year and a half now, since the Mueller investigation ended. We have found out that that was a corrupt investigation, and that further information about that will be exposed, although it doesn't appear that right now they're focusing too much on the Mueller investigation. Durham and the people who we're looking at right now seem to really focus mostly on the FISA part of the situation, because that's where the actual crimes were committed. And Jensen is the one looking into the role the Mueller investigation played. And that's a separate investigation, part of the Durham investigation, but separate as well. And so first, you're going to go after the crimes that we know were committed. That would be the things having to do with the FISAs. They got FISAs, and Durham already put in the Kevin Kleinsmith charging document that various high-level members and leaders at the FBI and Crossfire Hurricane team were told in August of 2016 that Carter Page was clean and was not a Russian asset, rather was a CIA operative in good standing. They knew that all the way back in August 2016. That was a major, bombshell to have in the Kevin Kleinsmith charging document. It tells us that Durham already knows that there were multiple people in the FBI and the head guys in Crossfire Hurricane that knew back in August of 2016 that Carter Page was clean. Everything that was done after that was a violation. Now the only question is, of all the people who signed off on FISAs, how many of them knew this? Well, we know certainly some of them did. Comey, McCabe. We don't know about Yates. We don't know about, Baker probably knew. We don't know about Rodenstein, but he probably knew. So the first people you're going to go after are people who had anything to do with the illegal FISAs. Kleinsmith was the first. He'll give up more, and we'll get more people from the FISAs. Now, once you've gone there and you've now got that taken care of, then the next thing you go after is why. So we answered the question, what did they do? They lied to the FISA court. They openly lied to the FISA court to get the warrants to spy on Carter Page. Not just one, but 4. 1 warrant and 3 renewals. There's the crimes. What did they do? They lied to the FISA court. And there's a lot of crimes involved in that. Then you ask the next big question, why did they do it? And it's in the why did they do it that you find the conspiracy. That will come later. And that will engulf a lot more people, many of whom will come forward and talk. And we'll find out when we get to the bottom of this thing that it's exactly what it has looked like for the past 2.5 years. That about 2 or 3 dozen corrupt people at the top of the FBI, DOJ, and intel community, along with some private contractors, foreign governments, and other people like that, were involved in a coup. Period. That's what we're going to learn. We're going to learn what we've known already for 2.5 years. We're just going to get the evidence now to back it up. Yeah, and as far as, calling in Brennan to become a witness, well, Brennan will be a horrible witness for anybody. He's a liar. He's a pathological liar. So you would not want to use Brennan as a witness. You would only want to see if he's stupid enough to come in and talk to you. And he's going to lie to you, and that's a good reason to bring him in, because when he lies to you, you've now got him in a perjury trap. And once you've got Brennan in a perjury trap, then you can call him back and say, okay, we've reviewed your testimony, we've gone back and looked at other documents from other witnesses and testimony and evidence that we have, and we've determined that you lied to us, and we are going to charge you with multiple counts of perjuring yourself. Now, maybe you want to come in and talk about it, and maybe we can cut a deal. We'll see how that goes. Keep in mind, as far as we know, Comey, Peter's been stroking us, McCabe, Loose Lisa Page, and many others on the FBI side, Pre-Step, and probably a couple others, Gauhar. As far as we know, they've never been interviewed. Pretty good reason for that. Pretty good reason for that. It means that they are likely going to be targets. The fact that he has not interviewed them means he's probably planning on charging them with crimes. He doesn't need to interview them. He already has enough evidence and witness testimony from others that he interviewed to know that they committed the crimes. He knows that even if he did invite them in and tell them that they are targets of his investigation, that their lawyers would tell them to clam up and they would get up and walk out. They're not going to talk to you. Comey, Strzok, McCabe, Gauhar, none of these people are going to come in and talk to you. They're all clearly guilty, having been a part of the illegal FISA crimes. And, of course, the other crimes come later. As I said, once you get past what did they do, they committed these crimes, then you get to the why did they do it. And that's where the conspiracy comes into play. So the focus right now is on the FISA because that's where the crimes are. The other stuff will come later. Another issue probably that they drilled down on, and another place where I think Brennan has a lot of problems along with Comey, McCabe, Strzok, and all the rest, in addition to the fact that they already knew that Carter Page was clean a long time ago, is, again, going back to the ICA, we've had this dispute now going on for a very long time where you have on the intel side, including Brennan, saying that it was Comey and McCabe who were pushing to have the Steele, or what they called the I forget what term they used, but the Crown information, I believe they called it. The Crown information, meaning the Steele dossier. The CIA and Brennan and the CIA side are making the argument that it was Comey and McCabe that were pushing to make sure that the Steele dossier stuff made it into the ICA. But on the other side, the FBI side, you've got McCabe and Comey and others on the FBI side saying that no, it was Brennan who was pushing for that information. So Durham has got to get to the bottom of exactly who's telling the truth, and I think they're both lying. I think that they were all in on both sides, CIA and FBI, on getting the Steele information in there. They really had to do that. That's all they had. But that it was Brennan who was pushing for the narrative that Russia was trying to help Trump and hurt Hillary. That apparently came straight from Brennan and the intel side. But whether to include the dossier information in the ICA is apparently being disputed by FBI versus CIA, both blaming each other for it. So Brennan will probably get to the bottom of that, and I think you'll find out that that they both wanted it in there, but neither wanted to be the one responsible for putting it there. So it will be interesting if we ever find out, and I'm sure we will, whether Brennan owned up to that and said, yeah, well, yeah, we did want it in the dossier, not in the main body, but in as a footnote. Or maybe he'll stick to his guns and say, which means he will be lying, and say, no, we didn't want that in there. That was Comey and McCabe that were pushing for that to be in there. I don't know how Brennan could be saying he's going to make the argument that the Steele information should not be there. At the same time, he's going to try to make the argument that the Russians were trying to help Hillary. Without the Steele information in there to buttress that argument, what else do you have? Nothing, really. So I think that they got Johnny B red-handed on this one. And I would expect Mr. Potato Head is going to be charged with, at the very least, perjury. But he was involved in so many things. Remember, he was also in that January 5th meeting. He was in the meeting with Comey and Obama before Comey went over to run the setup on Trump at Trump Tower on the so-called dossier briefing. He was involved in that as well. He's up to his eyeballs in just about everything. And despite this spokesperson, Mr. Shapiro, coming out and making these claims that Brennan was simply there as a witness and not as a target, I'm not buying it. First of all, Nick Shapiro is not telling us who told him that. He wasn't there. He's not using any quotes by Brennan. Brennan has not made any of these statements himself. Why is that? He doesn't want to incriminate himself. He wants to be able to deny it later. So my thoughts are at this point would be to basically ignore this statement. I can't remember which one of the, because this is all over every media outlet, pretty much everywhere. I can't remember which the one or two or three that I read where they said they actually did contact the Durham investigation, and they have no comment on this statement, whether Brennan was a witness or a target or whatever. No comment whatsoever from the Durham investigation. No comment from the DOJ press spokesperson. No comment from the FBI. None of them want to comment on this statement made by this press spokesperson. I would have to chalk this up to political bullshit. I would take it with a grain of salt. I don't believe it for a minute. It doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. If they wanted Brennan as a witness, he would have been used in a grand jury to testify against a target. He would not have been brought in for an interrogation, which lasted 8 hours. And I doubt they spent 8 hours just verifying some facts. Why would they want to verify facts with someone they know is a compulsive liar? Someone who's up to his eyeballs in the crimes. I would say that this was more than likely they threw a line out there to see if whether Brennan would bite, and he did. They thought, hey, this guy's so arrogant, he might actually come here and try to do a spin job on us. Let's see if he does it. Let's see if he's stupid enough to come here and do that. He was. As I said earlier, I think this very likely was a perfectly legitimate and legal perjury trap. They gave Brennan the opportunity to come in and lie to them, and I think he probably did. My guess is he told quite a few lies in that interrogation, which lasted 8 hours. I would say disregard the statement from the spokesperson. Disregard it completely. I would say it's probably just political hocus pocus. I would say that Brennan absolutely is a target of the investigation, not a witness. And I think there'll be more to come on this. He's in the top tier of people. They've shown no interest at this point in talking to Comey, McCabe, Strzok, or any of those people. You know why? Because they actually are targets. And they don't really need to talk to them. They've talked to people around them, below them. They've seen documents, they've got emails, they've got texts, they've got all kinds of things. They got everything they need to incriminate and charge these individuals. And they don't expect if they called these people in that they would talk. They would plead the fifth. Which is probably what Mr. Potato Head should have done. So this is really just probably nothing more than plain politics on Brennan's side. I would say there was very little, if any, truth to what his spokesperson reported on, who wasn't even there. I find it hard to believe that you would have someone come in for 8 hours, the last person that you interview on the intelligence side, the top tier guy, the head of the CIA. You have him come in there to just verify some things or whatever. They don't need to do that. They don't need to do that. And again, if he were a witness, he would have been in front of a grand jury testifying against someone else who was a target. People that they bring in for those conversations, they're bringing in there for the very reason to get information, or because they've got information and they want to see if that person lies to them. That's when they got you. They got you and they call you in to see if you lie. That's how it works. Brennan's not, again, I've said this before. What we are learning and what we have learned over the past 2.5 years is that these guys, these FBI guys, CIA guys, DOJ guys, who thought they were so smart, we're finding out that these guys are really not that smart at all. In fact, they're pretty much the Keystone Cops. They haven't gotten where they are because of their intellect. Most of them were hand-pointed, the political people appointed by Comey in the after 2015 period. I mean, these guys were hand-selected, corrupt people who got where they are and were put into the positions they were in because they knew they could be counted on to carry out the coup. I think that's what the evidence is going to show in due time. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See you guys. Bye.